Film, fashion, comedy, photography. Um, this woman is Red Miller Cody, and she's a Navajo, and I think she does all kinds of things: film, costume design, etc. You name it. Fashion. Yeah, that's her. And then there's an artist, Joan Hill. She's a Creek. Uh, let's see, she does watercolor, pastels, ink, mixed media. And then Lloyd Kivanu, Cherokee from Oklahoma. He began teaching art in the reservations and co-founded the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. Right. Yeah, so he's well known. Lloyd Kivanu, he died in 2002. And this one is Superman. He's a crow. And Native American music with hip hop. He combined the two. I don't have a video of him. He's known for performing from head to moccasin and full headdress and tales of reservation life. I mean, we can maybe look at him, Superman. Let me write his name down. Get a video of him performing. P-A-M-A-N, Superman. And here is Marla Tallchief, an Osage. She's the first major prima ballerina for the New York City Ballet, first Native American. And she's from Oklahoma. And she was the muse of choreographer Balanchine's, and best known for her powerful performance in Stravinsky's The Firebird. Oh, all right. And where's the one with the moccasins? I saw a video at one thing. There was a cool video about moccasins. No, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Moccasins is work of art. These are center seam. Then center seam construction. Side seam. The different ways of making them. Beautiful. Rawhide. Yeah, they're travel bags made out of hides. Those are called parfleches. I got a video on parfleches, the bags. They, put them over the horses or carried them on their backs. Just some food and other supplies that they go with. That's cool. Quill work. Beautiful. Beaded bags. Yeah. Our shoes should be like that. We just wear these boring brown, men do anyway, black shoes. I want to see if I can find this one. Let's see. Yeah, speaking of moccasins, here you go. Come on.
When I was a young kid, a teenager, in my mom's store, a Lakota lady came in and had a pair of fully beaded All-Star Converse high tops. And my mom bought them, and my sister and I thought they were the most amazing shoes we'd ever seen in our lives. What I realized with a pair of shoes was that you can read them, they don't have to match, and that they became sculptural to me in a certain way, so that it was an object more than an accessory that you wear, and that you could read them, that the stories flowed around them, and that I could tell a pictorial narrative with them. People would approach my shoes and I would have a pictorial story on them, some important pictorial story that I wanted to get across. They would come up to my shoes in public, and they would come up with laughter, with a smile on their face. And initially, I was offended. I couldn't understand why they were laughing at my important work that I was doing. Then I would tell them the story, and they would walk away with a piece of American history that they had never heard before, some concept that they'd never known, or whatever it was, something about Kiowa people that they didn't even know who Kiowas were, and they walked away with that knowledge. And what I realized, and this is the reason why I will continue to do Chucks, Converse, they are familiar. In America, across the planet, you've either owned a pair of these, your kids have owned a pair of these, you played basketball in these, you had good times in them, you did your own little graffiti on them, you've worn them out. They are familiar. And this familiar object is a perfect vehicle for me to tell a story like that. I want to continue to talk about abstraction in American art and where abstraction in American art came from. And it is my view that American abstractionists were looking at the primitive arts of the world. In America, they were specifically looking at Native women's art. For Kiowa people, our women are the abstractionists. The men are the pictorial historical painters. So when they do a winter count, they're painting little figures, but the women were abstracting the world. And what were they painting on? They were painting on parts.
That's a really fascinating observation, that it's the women that were abstracting, and men were doing more literal. And that modern abstractionism is drawing on traditional and Picasso, etc. Societies that were probably it's the woman who were doing the abstraction. So that's this really incredible observation.
They're painting on rawhide containers. What were those rawhide containers? They contained the most important things of that family: the ceremonial clothing, the food, the medicine. All of those things were the things that were deemed important enough to be contained in these rawhide containers. I think that's a phenomenal thing. Those Native women were painting the world abstractly, in pigment, on hide. And so I know that there's a link. I know that there's a link in art history. There's a link in that continuum of human expression. And that comes from women. That abstraction, I really think, is a feminine ideal. So that's what these shoes are about. It is my wish, my hope, my prayer that these shoes put forward the idea that abstraction is a feminine ideal. That abstraction, at least in North America, started with women's hands and women's eyes, and in our minds and our hearts, that's where that came from.
Yeah. Right. I don't want that. All right, let's look a little bit at the Totem Poles, Northwest. Really important art form.
I'm going to make some slippers for my daughter. She chose a pattern from the Athabascan Beadwork Patterns collection.
In the Pacific Northwest, memories and ties that bind are embodied in one of Native America's most iconic structures, totem poles. Like wampum belts, totem poles record the history of war, kinship, and leaders. But totem poles are often misunderstood.
You know, the saying low man on a totem pole doesn't really equate at all. They're just about all as equally as important as the next guy, and you know, the guy on the bottom supporting everything else above him, so it actually seems a little backwards.
The power of the pole comes from the cedar tree. Cedar is central to the lives of the native peoples of the Northwest. It is used to make clothing, storage chests, and ceremonial masks. For Kwakwaka'wakw carvers, Alan Hunt and Bo Dick, cedar is a portal to the past.
There's a certain relationship that our people have with the cedar tree. It reconnects us with our ancestors, with our story, with our identity, and it's just really sacred to us. Each grain is a year, and you become sensitized to it the more you work it. You feel it cutting through each year and time. My grandfather did that. My great-grandfather did that. My great-great-great-grandfather did that. They all did it. I'm following their footsteps. And that's really personal. And we share that. We're following what was provided by our ancestors and the relationship that they had with the Creator.
Got several on totem poles.
I'm Keith Wolf-Smarch, and I'm the lead carver for the Carcross-Tagish First Nation. Well, the history of our carving, we're made up of two groups, two tribes, the coastal Tlingit and the inland Tagish. In order to establish the trading, we intermarried. And when the Tlingit moved in from the coast, they brought the art with them. So now that we're intermarried, we call ourselves inland Tlingit. And so now we have the art. The history pole at the Carcross Commons is kind of like a contemporary modern version of our trading history and some of our stories. So if you look at the pole, starting at the bottom, we have a coastal man. And he represents the coastal Tlingit that came in to trade with us. And right on top of the Tlingit man, there's a Tagish woman holding a box of trade goods. And the woman and the man represent the intermarriage of our two tribes. Then we get into a story about Skookum Jim, a little bit of our history. And one of our stories is that a frog actually helped Skookum Jim in the gold fields to help the gold. This is what we believe. So if you look at the pole, the frog is coming up and the killer whale is coming back down. And the killer whale represents Skookum Jim. And one of the stories, he came back to help the frog. And then standing on top of the killer whale, we have a thunderbird. And the thunderbird represents the coming of the White Pass train. Because if you look on the train now, on the front of the engine, is a thunderbird on there. And then on top of the thunderbird, we have a copper shield. And the copper shield represents spiritual wealth for the future. Totem pole raising is a huge ceremony. And tradition, as tradition goes, that once we're done carving the pole, the carvers don't help anymore. So it was the people that came, and it was actually like 80 men came and carried the pole into its place. And then when we raise it, the carvers, my son and I and my grandson helped also, we did a carver's dance. And the carver's dance signifies that we're handing the responsibility of the pole over to people now, and we're finished. And so it's a big day.
Well, I think there's more spiritual meaning to some of the more traditional totem poles, have them to do with shamanism, and we'll get into that when we, it may not be this week, mostly with petroglyphs and um, rock carvings, and I think it's probably similar to totem poles that um, shamans would also in the rocks, but I think also on the poles will record their visions and the spirit animals that they experienced, and it had a lot to do with um, transformation between animals and humans. A shaman could become an animal, could become a bird, or these animals could become human, and so all this is part of the spiritual life of the tribe and maintaining their ability to thrive. And the shaman was essential to it. So it's the works of art, whether it's a totem pole or on a rock. It's not just like oh, let's paint a history. There's some of that, but it's also has it's a power. The rock, it emits the power to enable this ongoing interaction between the spirit world and the everyday world. Okay, so let's see. I think it's this one. Why am I here? Okay. Oh, God, do it again.
If you're looking for a CRM,
Art and traditional stories from other cultures can inform and inspire our own creative work. They can also push us beyond the limits of our own experiences and challenge us to strive towards our full human potential. Totem poles are a great example of this, with their stunning artwork depicting fascinating and compelling narratives. When you think of Native American culture, you probably think of teepees and totem poles, but most Native American tribes didn't have either of these. Totem poles were only carved by a small number of tribes, those living in the area marked in red here on the map, from southeastern Alaska down the coast of Canada as far south as Vancouver Island. We do not know how long the tribes in this region carved these poles. The tribes had no system of writing and kept no records, and the poles themselves decomposed and deteriorated. We have a couple of sketches from explorers in the 1790s like this one, showing interior house poles or exterior entrance poles. The evidence suggests that column carving existed at least a few generations before contact with Russian and European explorers, but that contact caused radical changes to the art form. The fur trade brought a huge increase in wealth to the region. The traders brought iron tools, which made the carvers more efficient and their designs more elaborate. The traders also brought diseases that caused tragic loss of life, leaving many leadership positions vacant. These factors led to lavish displays of wealth, gift-giving, and chiefly competitions for social rank that dramatically increased the number of poles commissioned. This brought about what is known as the Golden Age of Totem Poles in the 1800s. Totem poles were carved of western red cedar. It is a beautiful soft wood, very workable, but also very durable. The larger poles could be around 30 to 40 feet tall, sometimes taller, with a diameter of 4 feet or so. The poles could often stand for 50 to 60 years out in the elements before they would collapse. A pole could take as long as 2 years to carve. A patron would hire a carver from outside his own clan, preferably from another tribe altogether. The carver and his family would often live with the patron during the entire process. The patron would spend a great deal of time communicating to the carver the histories and legends of his family. These carvers, with their many travels and exposure to stories from other clans, were perhaps the most culturally aware members of their society. Carvers had plenty of freedom in how they depicted the figures on these poles, but they always followed formal stylistic rules. Ravens had straight beaks, eagles had curved beaks. Beavers always had two large front teeth and held a stick in their paws. Wolves and bears looked surprisingly similar, but they could be distinguished by the shape of their teeth and the length of their snouts. Other symbols could communicate further details. These two dorsal fins on this killer whale indicate that it is a supernatural figure. One of the great poles carved at the end of the Golden Age is this raven pole carved for the chief in Wrangell, Alaska in 1896. This postcard from 1913 shows how the pole looked standing outside the chief's house. The original pole collapsed in the 1970s, but this replica of the pole still stands in Wrangell today. This pole depicts the story of how Raven, the great culture hero of Pacific Northwest legends, placed the sun in the sky. The second figure on the pole is this raven. He was a trickster figure who could change forms, so he is depicted here in both raven and human form. He is also depicted with a sun around his face because of his role in this story. In the beginning, the world was covered in darkness. All the light was hidden away in a box by the creator, the top figure on this pole. The creator in this tribe's tradition was also a raven. Notice the straight beak. Trickster Raven began scheming how to steal the light from the creator raven. He transformed himself into a hemlock needle and floated down the stream, where the third figure on the pole, the daughter of creator raven, drank him up. She later gave birth to a son, Trickster Raven in disguise. Trickster Raven pleaded with his new grandfather, throwing tantrums and begging him to take the light out of the box and let him play with it. When Creator Raven reluctantly agreed, Trickster Raven turned back into his real form, carried the light up through the smoke hole of the house, and placed it in the sky as the sun. The story of totem poles does not end with the Golden Age. The 20th century saw a decline in pole carving, some government attempts to recreate the art, and a revival of sorts in the 50s and 60s among native artists who could still learn from the old masters. But that story will have to wait for another day. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit randyhoyt.com/ignite for links to resources I would recommend. I hope you'll spend a little time studying these beautiful poles and the amazing narratives they depict.
I want one. My house. For my house. Let's see. There's one more here on totem. I don't know if I've showed it already. We'll see.
If you're looking for a CRM, you're
Art and traditional stories.
Only this watch. All right. Okay. Let's move in. Do you mind if we go into a little bit of music again? Anybody familiar with Inuit throat singing? You know what it is? The Inuits are subarctic, Alaska, Upper Canada tribe. And the woman had this form of singing where two of them sang together and making all these animal sounds and guttural sounds. So I want to show you, it's really interesting. It's nothing like it in our culture. And so I want to show you an example of a traditional Inuit throat singing. And then there's a woman who's one of my favorite people on the planet. She's Canadian. All my favorite singers are Canadian. Bruce Cockburn, Tanya Tagat is her name here. Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell. Okay, so and then the person Tanya Tagak is a Canadian. What's her tribe? I forget. But she's taking traditional Inuit throat singing and turn it into a punk rock amazing performance. So I want to start with this. It's an art form, so it's not painting, but with that.
Mine's black. It's more green. has more green.
Mine's black. Starts with black and it has more green.
My name is Karen Kettler, and I'm an Inuit throat singer and drum dancer.
My name is Kathy Kettler, and I'm an Inuit throat singer and drum dancer.
Is that hard enough?
Yeah, that's good.
We are in Anchorage, Alaska. We are here to perform at the Circumpolar Music Festival at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. This music festival is an opportunity for groups from around the circumpolar region to come and share their music, and we're really honored to be amongst the people that are here.
The sounds that we're going to be making is you have to make sure that you're breathing out as much as you're breathing in, or else you might get lightheaded. Inuit throat singing is a friendly competition between girls. It was something that they would do while the men were out hunting. We do imitations of the sounds that we hear around us, like animals and tools in nature.
It's the same sound, but only a half second off from each other, and that's how we can blend our voices. Throat singing comes from our voice, our throat, and our breathing.
Breathe.
Okay.
All right.
I really enjoy throat singing. It is part of the culture that we're from, Inuit culture. It is very unique in the sense that there are no other cultures in Canada that do this sort of singing.
I'm looking for 2 volunteers.
It's very important to pass along throat singing. It is a very oral tradition. It can't be written down. It has to be learned from someone else.
Throat singing is a strength for our people, for the Inuit people, and being able to learn it and be proficient at it and pass it on to others is a really great gift to have and give. Thank you. That's it, eh?
That's an introduction to throat singing. It's not something you can dance to, but
I've never heard anything like that.
but now I'm going to blow your mind. Okay, so that's just the basic. But what you're going to see next, to me, it's one of the most incredible performances of anybody. But let me have it, Tanya just talking about it first before I show you what she does. Let me see if I can find it. Tanya, here you go. The sound. All right, here's Tanya talking about a little bit more the art of it. I love this woman. You'll see why when she performs.
I should just explain a little bit about the sounds. There's many different ways that you can produce this noise. Some of it is on everything on exhalation. Some of it is inhaling for parts, and some of it is all inhalation. But here, I'll just give you some small examples. Like, it's a song that you give the deep part on the exhalation and then a high note on the inhalation, like so when you're inhaling, you teach your throat how to make a noise. There's other noises that are exhaling for everything, and it's a little more difficult because you have to learn how to splice the notes, going from high to low in one time. So you're making a noise like high up with your normal talking voice and in your nasal cavity, and then dropping it really quickly into your epiglottis. And then you can start to play with inhalations and exhalations and with your mouth. It doesn't just it doesn't have to be so simple like doing this. So you're doing essentially the same thing as this, but you're playing only with your mouth. And then there's some of the songs have only deep tones, and then you teach yourself to inhale very sharply and quickly in between the sounds. And you can actually make the deep sound going in as well. So there's all sorts of various ways of doing this type of singing. It's quite difficult to teach yourself how to do it. You probably have to sing for a while, practicing with this. Some of the people that I've tried to teach to throat sing, I tell them they have to spend 1 year trying to sound like their dog first, like growling. It's the initial thing. And once you get that down, then you can start thinking about getting into the more complicated stuff. Yeah.
All right, with all that in mind, I'll watch what she does with it. So she formed a group, a band, and took this traditional art, Inuit voice singing, which is usually done in pairs with 2 women, and turned it into a solo performance and merged it with rock and punk. And here's her performance, one of her performances. And I'm not going to show the whole thing. I wanted to show you excerpts. It's 38 minutes long. But it's one of the most amazing where she goes in this performance. Is most non-native people or white people would never go there. It gets into some really incredible, deep parts of our unconscious that are like we usually don't want to even think about or talk about. And and she's performing at Massey Hall. Anybody ever hear of Massey Hall? Massey Hall is the Carnegie Hall of Canada. Massey Hall is in Toronto. If you get invited to play or perform at Massey Hall in Canada, you've made it. Just like getting invited to perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Okay, so she's well known. She in Canada. She performs internationally, but it's not like anything you've ever heard. Okay, so.
Every venue is so different, and every venue kind of has a stigma attached to it, or not. When I play a certain place, it's not necessarily what I'm bringing to the venue, but what pretty grounded. The thing about growing up in Nunavut is I'm pretty grounded. Like, I'm not even afraid to make that statement that I'm grounded. And I'm lucky because I spend half my time in the air. So happy to have some roots on the ground. I've been doing this for a long time. I think society is just, it's such an interesting time in our culture, in Canadian culture. Like, Indigenous people are having a voice, and you know, when I was growing up, it was a little bit more of the shunning of our own culture. I'm very, very interested in pre-Christian Inuit life, and I'm very interested in the amalgamation of culture. Like every country we go to, I inquire on the political system, and also take serious note of the social climate resulting from each political system and how people act and react to certain situations, and how socialization is the spearhead of everything. Like people will do anything if everyone else is doing it, and people will be civil if everyone else is being civil, and people will hate a certain thing if everybody's hating a certain. Like, it's so strange how that all works in every culture. I try to look at every country and their system and go, okay, what's working best here? And then I take that hope, and this may sound really naive, but I take that hope and go, maybe Canada can have this. You know, maybe our country can, you know, rise above this like broken, crazy history, and you know, maybe, just maybe I could have something to do with a shift in the statistics that, you know, my people live under. Well, people live under, they're not mine, you know. People call me an activist, but I don't consider myself an activist. I consider myself somebody that is alive and has been living this life, hoping to make life better for people I see hurting.
To the middle and then a little bit at the end. I dare you to watch the whole thing. It's 38 minutes long. She takes you through some of the darkest, most intense, powerful, emotional, gut-wrenching side of herself and humanity. And sometimes it felt like she's channeling all the anguish and pain of all the Native Americans that have been, through the genocide. And but just this the other, it's just the whole range of stuff. But it is I don't know, not for the faint and weak of heart, let's put it that way. So if you want to watch this gut-wrenching, incredible performance, and the music too, there it is, Tanya Tagaq live at Massey Hall, and it was in 2015. So, but that is so cool. Here it is, she's taking this very traditional two-woman art form or vocal expressions of the Inuit and took it into this whole other direction. Actually, some of the traditionalists in her culture are not happy with her, that she's bastardizing it and turning it into something that's not there. So some people of her own people don't like what she's doing. But anyway, she's just, it's her thing. So I watched it a couple times, and it's like, I just feel like, it also feels like really cleansing. It's like she's like it's like you're washing clean all this pain and anguish, and yeah, if you let yourself do it. But it fits into the tribal dances, it's like and where they would go, and ceremonial dances, and just and you could say like punk rock and slam dancing. It's kind of a modern variation on Native American ceremonial dancing. All right, what time we got here? 3:30. Okay. So that was the Inuits. Yeah, let's do a little bit. Let's put it go. Something about the passenger pigeons. Notice. Why did the passenger pigeon go extinct? That's the last. Her name was Martha. This is the last known passenger pigeon. She died in 1914, and her body's been preserved out of billions of them. Let's see. There's some drawings of what it was like. Let's see. I think I have numbers. Oh well, anyway. I think that's cool that that the last known one was preserved. I think they were mostly on the eastern half of the United States too. They fly from Canada. I don't know where they would go, where they would spend the winter. Pipes. Pipe making is an art form. Peace pipe.
There is a sacred tradition that's kept alive in a small town in our state. Native Americans believe it's a crossroads unlike any other, allowing them to celebrate their proud culture. And this week's Finding Minnesota, John Lauritsen takes us to Pipestone County, where pipe makers are carving out a piece of history.
The philosophy of uniting the world over the pipe, to me, is a huge thing.
The picturesque spring waterfall at Pipestone National Monument flows like a postcard that's come to life. It demands the attention of visitors, but for Bud Johnston, the waterfall is beauty, but the stone is sacred.
This is our people. This is the past 7 generations. This is me, and I'm supposed to take the pipe to the next 7 generations.
Bud grew up on the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin, but he really became interested in his Ojibwe heritage while living in California in the 1970s, healing the mind and body with ancient tools and instruments.
You feel it vibrate way down in there?
Better than a chiropractor. It was a proud way of life, but something was missing. At ceremonies, Native American pipes were hard to come by.
And I mumbled, if I ever get back around Pipestone, I'll make pipes available to whoever needs them.
As fate would have it, an airline's job eventually allowed Bud to move to the small town. He taught himself how to make pipes and began quarrying at the nearby national park in 1984. 12 years later, he bought the last train depot in town and formed the keepers of the sacred tradition of pipe makers.
Yeah, there was 35 of us carving pipestone when we formed the organization in 1996. And there's only 8 of us left.
But while numbers dwindle, believers grow.
The freedom to express yourself naturally as you feel God calls you to. You don't have to be Native to believe in prayer through pipes.
You can start rounding the pipe out.
With a piece of pipestone in hand, Bud saws, carves, and files away.
You can go to a smaller file, start knocking those bumps down.
When he has just the right shape, he boils it and then adds wax, a process that brings out color and sometimes more.
You're waxing it. Wow, look at this. Wow, look at that. And they can't take their hands off of it. And you'll be amazed, I think, how the color of that pipe will change.
When it's done, a stem, often carved from a sumac tree, is added, and then the pipe is ready to be smoked with the traditional form of tobacco.
My people call it kinnikinnick. It's the inner bark of the red willow mixed with herbs that are in your area.
The pipe can be used for many reasons. Tribes would smoke before battle, seeking help from the spirits. It's also a symbol of peace and protection. The Ojibwe people believe smoke is a vehicle to the Creator. But interest in these pipes extends far beyond Bud's train depot.
We've done classes in France, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Australia, and New Zealand.
They've had visitors from all those countries too. Pipestone is a rare crossroads between a sacred rock and a sacred tradition, one that Bud hopes to keep alive with his own 2 hands. John Lordson, WCCO 4 News.
For more information on the
I didn't know they made it out of pipestone. That was a certain type of rock. I didn't know. Headdress was a work of art and a power object. And they think they know where Sitting Bull. Bull's like he went to Canada to escape with his people, and he stayed as long as he could. The U.S. government put a lot of pressure on the Canadian government to force him to leave, and the Canadian government kind of played it both ways. They didn't really want to, but they didn't want to upset the American government. So they didn't give him much support food-wise. And there was another tribe just north of him. He was near the American border that didn't like him, Sitting Bull's people being there because they were encroaching on their hunting grounds. So basically, they were starving over a couple of years. But Sitting Bull befriended this Mountie policeman. I forget the guy's name. They became really good friends. And Sitting Bull, the story goes, Sitting Bull finally gave up and surrendered, went back to the States. But he gave him his headdress. And that's sort of known because this man, the Mountie policeman, wrote that. And then they think it's in this museum. So here it is.
Before leaving, he gave his friend Walsh his most precious possession.
Start from again.
Before leaving, he gave his friend Walsh his most precious possession, his headdress. But was it this headdress? Nobody knows for sure. Arnie is going to try something different, hoping to get closer to revealing the secret, with help from Ernie LaPointe, Sitting Bull's last living descendant.
I think that his genes or his DNA or whatever you want to say is in me. And I have that certain special understanding of recognizing things that are his.
Ernie never knew his great-grandfather, and he's never seen the headdress. But he'll try to bring the two together by invoking the Sioux belief that the spirit of the dead can be felt in things that once belonged to them.
Hi. Hey, Arnie, how you doing there?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Here we are. Finally.
Yeah, finally I'm looking at this. I run my hand over it real slowly, and I can feel the energy come out of it. If it doesn't belong to my grandfather, I don't feel nothing. It's like just nothing. And when I ran my hand over this headdress, I could feel the heat. You can feel the energy.
You can?
I can, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to touch it, you know, it's just about that far. You know, you can just feel it's really warm.
Oh.
You feel the hand there.
Yeah.
You know, it emits this heat. And it really is an honor to see this and feel it, because it really was on his head one time.
Yeah.
I could feel it, I was telling you.
How he perceives that headdress through his sight, how he perceives the whole context of our museum and the way that we are treating these objects, all of these things may have come together and given him a complete sense that, gut feeling that this object is what it's reputed to be.
Maybe Major Walsh would have wanted it preserved like this, you know, because it was a gift from a friend. And maybe they're friends in the spirit world yet, you know. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe Sitting Bull welcomed him in the spirit world.
Well.
Yeah, that's cool. For Sitting Bull to give him his headdress, they were really good. He really respected this man. Okay, let's get out of here. There we go. We're going for time, 3:42. Got time for a couple more. Come on, move. See. Yes, we can start looking. Well, let's look at Canyon de Chelly. It's in northeastern part of Arizona. Anybody been there? Canyon de Chelly? I was there when I lived in Arizona. It's pretty remarkable. And
yeah,
one
I
of the
was
main,
there.
like with Chaco Canyon, it's one of the major sites. And it was last.
If you're looking for a
Are
CRM,
you
your
talking
sales.
about, Joe, are you talking about Hopi now?
About what?
Hopi.
No, this is Navajo. I think this is mainly Navajo, but it's off the reservation. It's not on a reservation.
Yeah.
It's like directly east of the Grand Canyon, maybe 100 miles, 200 miles, something like that. Yeah. And when it was discovered by the white explorers, or they got up on there, it was last occupied by, I think, I forget the tribe. They still found food in the bowls because it was in the desert, no humidity, no rain, and the food had dried up, but it was still in the bowls. It was 500 years old, you know. But it's one of the most remarkable landscapes. There was mountains there. very sacred place. Oh, come on. Yes, that's a good introduction to petroglyphs, which we'll get into next time. Yeah, it looks like these are hunters, but the whole subject of petroglyphs and rock carving really fascinating, like because they're really misunderstood. Very few people know what they mean, and I just read this book on it, and you really need a shaman to explain, to give you some insight of what they are. And this author of the book was friends with this shaman for a long time, and it was like 5 years before he even said anything in terms of explanation. They're sworn not to tell. But it got some ideas from this book I read. So there's all kinds of misunderstanding, but it is a fascinating art form. And it's all over the United States, and they're very abundant in the Southwest. Of course, California has the Chumash Indians in California, all over the Southwest. And they're probably preserved better in the Southwest because it's an arid climate. And all over the Great Lakes, Lake Huron, there's some magnificent sites, and New England. And, going back centuries and centuries, some of them are more recent, but it's just to get some insight of what they're conveying, what the purpose of these petroglyphs are. Is really fascinating. So we'll delve into that a little more next time. But okay, so let me see if there's. But when I was at Canyon to say, I got to the edge of one of those the trail led right to the top of one of those cliffs, and it's 1,000-foot drop off. And I remember sitting with my legs dangling over the edge. And it's like, whoa. And for 3 nights in a row, I had falling dreams. I was like falling off the pine.
That would be fall.
Yeah. Okay. If we got time, we're at 3 minute time for one more short one. We'll see. It's not. Let's see. Those are all rock arts. Let's do Wampa Balance. Yeah, that's another fascinating art form.
In his diary of King Philip's War, Benjamin Church describes the wampum belt that belonged to Metacom. Opening his pack, he pulled out Philip's belt, curiously wrought with wampum, being 9 inches broad, wrought with black and white wampum in various figures and flowers and pictures of many birds and beasts. These were Philip's royalties, which he was wont to adorn himself with when he sat in state.
We felt with it. New England. That's amazing. That was all. That war took place in New England.
The term wampum comes from wampum peak, which literally means shell beads in the Wampanoag language. They've been made for millennia by indigenous people in New England. Because they are these different colors of beads, they can be used in a binary signaling system. And because they were so valuable and so widespread among native nations, when European colonists arrived, particularly the Dutch and the English, they started using these beads as a substitute for European currency. But they were not universally used by native nations as money. So they do not equate with Indian money. They simply equate with a powerful and valuable substance that was for a time used as a substitute for money.
I would say that wampum belts were the closest thing to written history for Wampanoag people.
So some of them have the past.
In terms of spiritual use and in ceremonies, they are like a document. They are very critical to preserving our traditions and our story and our heritage.
Historically, wampum was used in several different forms as adornment for beautiful objects to wear in the ears and around the neck and around the perimeters of the body. Wampum was used in the form of disc beads as decorative pieces, adornment pieces, but in the form of tubular beads, that's when wampum really reached a very unique form of being able to signal understandings.
After Metacom's belt was taken, Benjamin Church turned the belt over to the governor of Plymouth Colony, who was Josiah Winslow. Josiah Winslow was seeking to get favor from the king. He had written a war report and was delivering spoils of war back to the King of England. Josiah handed them to his brother-in-law, Waldegrave Pelham. Waldegrave then took them across to England, where it's unclear what happened to them after that, but they were never delivered to the king. That's the last we know of it.
My name is Mashquanit, also known as Linda Coombs,
And I live in Mashpee and am from the Aquina tribe, Wampanoag tribe on Martha's Vineyard.
Somehow you got turned
I've
off.
seen most of these belts anyway in pictures, in photographs, or in diagram, but seeing them, you know, live and in person here is a whole different thing. And it just, you know, has allowed me to get that much closer to look at them and to just to be with them and spend time with them has been extremely meaningful.
Natasawi Sonkwabin Nutamas Masapiak. I'm Paula Peters. My traditional name is Sonkwabin, and I'm from Mashpee. The Wampum Belt Project is an effort to create a wampum belt similar to ones that we would have historically made. And it's being produced within the Wampanoag community using Wampanoag artisans and inspiration from our community.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 4 going one way and the other 2 the other way.
To mark the 400th anniversary of the sailing of the Mayflower, the box has been working with the Wampanoag communities in Massachusetts, and we've commissioned a new symbolic piece of art. It's a wampum belt made of tiny shell, and it will tour nationally.
All right. All right, looks like we got to end. So great. Covered a lot of ground there.
Can you hear?
Pause.
Tell them thank you.